Hi, welcome everyone. Sorry, just sort of getting things set up on the stream. This taking me just a second here today, but I was cutting it kind of close and just got back from errands. But I think we can jump right into this. Got my games. Should be good to go. 1 second. Yeah, no. Usually it's a little better than this, but I literally just got here. I just got back from doing stuff. So, awesome. Uh, how's everyone doing this morning? Thank you very much for joining. I'm just about to open the game up, and yeah, the first game for this morning is Ansh's game. This is I think Ansh was playing black if I remember correctly, but let's open it up, and we're ready to go. Cool. So Ansh was playing white in this game, and I against really Y Bov. I've seen both of these guys. I think have submitted games. They're both from the Chess Study Group Discord, which is an awesome place. Highly recommend it. And yeah, let's look. E4, C5, Sicilian. And Anch is playing an early one bishop or an early two bishop C4. Um, Bishop C4 is an interesting opening move in the Sicilian. Basically, it is playable, and you can see it's a book move, but e6 can cause it some problems. It's openings are a style thing, so if it's something in particular that you like about this, the formations that you're getting out of Bishop C4, definitely don't let me steer you away from it. But from a fundamental perspective, in the open Sicilian particularly, the e6 pawn can really block off that bishop on c4. Hey, welcome Pixon5. How are you? Good morning. Thank you for joining. Um, this is yeah, good morning Aphelion. We've got some good we've got some good King's Gambit material for Aphelion this morning. Stopped clocks game a second, and yeah, this is great. Everybody's here, and I've got all the games for everybody, so ready to go. Um, Awesome. So yeah, so this is Anch's game. Running the bishop on c4 against f7 is it's always good to apply pressure to the weakest part of the of the opponent's position. But there is something somewhat so e6 makes bishop c4 a little bit more problematic. But again, if you like it, don't steer away from it. uh, Openings are often a stylistic thing, and as long as you're not hanging material or doing something really crazy, almost any opening is playable. D6, knight c3, knight f6, d3, and now he's transposed. It's basically like sort of the white side of a Rui Lopez Italian game type situation, and basically this bishop's going to get on the long diagonal here, and this e6 pawn could potentially be undermined with a move like f4 f5 later. Bishop to the c4 or the a2 g8 diagonal is probably justifiable in the Sicilian. But it does require f4 f5 breaks to set up any attack on f7. But it's possible. You definitely can do that if that's something that if that's a plan that you're comfortable with. Anyways, a6, bishop b3, b5, a4, b4, knight e2, bishop b7, and here basically yeah, it is like it is sort of an Italian type setup. Uh yeah, yeah. I mean it's harder for sure. Getting that Italian type setup against the Sicilian. The Italian type setup operates heavily on getting this basically getting an attack of the white squared bishop on f7, which is black's weakest point. I mean, that's one of the things that makes Italian setup so good. I really like the Italian setup. But it is trickier in the Sicilian just because of this e6 pawn. Uh, but still there's still ideas that can justify this setup, like f4, f5, and then pressure on e6, and then indirectly on f7. Um, but yeah, there it is true stop clock. It is it is a setup that people sort of gravitate towards, and But again, it's a good setup in my opinion. It's what I play as white, especially against e5. Bishop g5, bishop e7, knight g3, castles, e5. So yeah, so this is an interesting position. I don't particularly dislike. I think this is a fine position for white actually. I mean, yeah, maybe this bishop's got some challenges along this diagonal, but it is facing towards the king and towards f7. But I think the way to do this, if you want to maximize, is with queen d2, h4, h5, h6. I think that's probably a better way to do this than e5. E5 neutralizes the center. So basically, white's main controlling pawn in the center is this e4 pawn. So here, this basically, basically this pawn, can be used for attacks, but at this point, it's mainly used to kind of block a lot of black's plans. So like things like knight to d5, bishop to d5, black could play d5, but on d5, the best response would not be to take. It would be to play, so say black plays queen d2 and then d5 here. Then it might be reasonable to play e5, in which case the pawn gets anchored at e5 and doesn't trade off. Or you could just leave things sort of the way that they are. And here, like castles probably, castles, pawn takes, queen takes, knight takes, and then the e4 pawn is defended. But yeah, so in this situation, this is sort of, this is good. But I think neutralizing with e5 provides more problems for white than it solves. Like this it's good to be attacking, but like e5 is a move that attacks black, but it's a move that attacks black in such a way that it's sort of tricky to respond to. Hey, good morning, Jack. Welcome to the stream. But yeah, so e5 I think here is kind of I don't know. It's an idea, but it's a little bit premature. It's good to attack. It's good to attack, but black can just play takes d5 and knight takes d5 or knight takes e5 is kind of not really an improvement for white. You want to play, I think, more for kind of longer term, positional improvements, and wait for a later point when your attacks are more kind of solidly supported. Knight takes g5, queen h5, h6, bishop takes, queen takes, queen takes. And here, I don't know. I guess bishop to c4. This is interesting. I guess like here, black's winning by a bit. Takes, f7, queen h5. And actually here, white. So the real blunder here, of tactical positional blunder is on queen takes h5. So here, this does look like potentially this could win some material for white. I'm thinking h6, knight takes f7, rook takes, bishop takes, and then if there's more defense played on the f7 square, then rook takes f2 as well. Can be pretty solid. But yeah, anyways, I guess I would say that this is basically kind of an improvement for basically this leads to a solid attack for white. Here h6, and then knight takes f7 is the tactic. Rook takes, bishop takes, and then queen f6 probably. I don't know if you're supposed to neutralize immediately here. Engine suggesting queen f5, that seems sort of awkward. But certainly after bishop takes, queen takes, king takes, rook takes with check, white's up an exchange and is likely to win this game. Black's pawn structure is pretty fractured and stuff. So yeah, queen takes, bishop c4. Overall here, I think, black's basically in a pretty tough position. White's gonna win this game, I think. Yeah, looks like it neutralizes pretty well into a winning move. Winning position. So in terms of things to look at in this game for improvement, Bishop c4, I guess I would advise against. I think that e6 probably does refute this bishop c4 in the Sicilian. But it's up to you. It's if it really is providing positions that you like, then by all means play it. But e6 stops the threat along this diagonal. Bishop c4 I think is great in the Italian game and Ruy Lopez where it goes to b3. The bishop on diagonal is awesome after e5. But when e6 can be played as a response, there's just not enough. There's basically too much defense. There's not enough ability to break through Black's defense on that diagonal. So for that reason, bishop tends to go to like, I don't know, d3, and then threaten the king post castling, or e2, or g3 or g2. But this diagonal, I think, is not the best in many Sicilian openings. Second idea, I think e5 is early here. E5 can be used as an undermining move in some really good attacks, in the Sicilian for sure. But here, you're this didn't. I don't think e5 did much to improve your position. Basically here, White's sort of probably got a slightly better center, sort of an equal center, not much doing either way. I think White's probably a little better, but not much. But e5 and pawn takes sort of just gives that pawn away to White, and makes it also makes this bishop diagonal more powerful. So from like a conceptual perspective, I would steer away from neutralizing the center here, particularly if it increases mobility for the bishop for Black. So yeah, so there's that. But then you get an opportunity basically. Black kind of falls asleep, on this threat from the knight on g5, and queen h5 sort of breaks open the position. There's slight improvement here tactically with knight takes f7, but overall, I think basically this situation is pretty good for this situation is pretty good for White, and it consolidates into a position where White's up a piece. So, ultimately, this plays out. But the improvements that I think I can offer here are pretty solid ones. Revisit bishop to c4 in the Sicilian. E6 is a blocking move for it, and then the second one, e5 here, is an attack that's not supported enough. After e5, pawn takes, knight takes, like, this doesn't stand much better for White. Here, if you count out, I mean, I'm sort of doing it by feel, so I'm not really like explaining super well how basically how the White control of the center works. I guess the really basic way that we could do this is probably looking at these four squares, d4, e4, d5, e5, and seeing how many times White's attacking it. So like here, there's one on d5, one on d5, one on e4. Sorry, one thread on e4 here, and then one thread each on d4 and e5. So we have, say, there's 6 moves. I think that's right. Oh no, and then there's one more from this knight. So there's 7. Basically, there's 7 points of attack for White on this center. I mean, this is a kind of a reductionist way of looking at it, but like, I think it might be helpful in explaining some things. So let's say White has 7 7 points of attack on this direct center. 2, 1, 3, 1, 1. So 7 total. You play e5, okay, and the likely move here for Black is takes, and then knight takes, and now you have 1, 2, 3 points of attack on the center. Again, this is like a super reductionist way of looking at it. Like, I wouldn't, the situations in which this holds true are not absolute, like for sure. Or alternatively, whatever, with castles, say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 points of attack on the center. So yeah, so white's center control declines in this really crude way of counting it. So anyways, that should give some indication that that neutralization of e4 to e5 leads to a worse center for white. It's better to just hold the pawn on e5 uh, and just basically leave it there. Um, yes, yeah. So that's another tactical reason why knight takes isn't playable and why castles was played. But yeah, no, good point, Aphelion. But I think so that's a tactical reason that knight takes e5 can't be played. But what I'm mostly focusing on is I'm sort of trying to think about e5 like as a move and like how basically it's not a move that you should play if you ultimately wind up with a worse center. Your center here is fine, and e5 kind of neutralizes your control over it, and sort of, I mean, that doesn't actually look like it increases the number of squares that black controls, um, but it doesn't really increase white center control. So I think it's the type of move that's kind of a net zero or so it's a move where you can look for a better move. I think it doesn't particularly improve White's position. That's a really crude way that I counted the I counted the attacks on the center squares. I'm sure that there's a better way to do it. But if we're just looking at the really, I think it's a good kind of demonstration of exactly what's going on there. But yeah, anyways, it was an interesting game. Awesome tactic by Anst to win this one. Good tactical vision, and ends up being a win. But those are the two moves that I would take away and think about it. Think about. Cool. The next game is a stop clocks game, and let's take a look. Grand Prix attack. Yeah, no, good game, Anch. Good game for sure. It was a good win and good tactical execution at the end. You got him to, you basically won a piece up. Very solid. I hope it's helpful to kind of look at these points of review, and I really appreciate you sending the game and providing material for the stream. Yeah, no, it's really awesome, and thanks for helping with that. I hope my suggestions are helpful. Uh, but thank you very much for contributing and for sending the game in. Knight f3, bishop g4, and stop clock is playing white in this one. Okay, so here's like a Grand Prix Sicilian structure. In this case, c4 is more of a mainline move. It will still run into the same kind of difficulties. I think. I think e6 is still a very playable move, and this does stop that bishop on c4 a little bit better. But at least here, it's more of an established mainline move, and the differentiating thing between this position and two bishop to c4 is uh, no, honestly, whatever you're most interested in. In terms of game review, I'm super happy to look at anything. If you guys just have ideas of games that you'd like to see, or particular openings or end games that you'd like to see, I'm sure I could do that too. Super happy to do that too. Um, I guess in general terms, strategic plans over tactical games. Tactical games, the answer is I'm happy to go over everything. But I can't add as much value in highly tactical games because I'm at the end of the day going to be looking at the computer for improvements on tactics, and I'm not going to be able to explain long-term strategy. The value of a human over a computer at this point is they can explain why they're doing what they're doing. They basically they can see, okay, controls this piece of the board, or this expands this. Whereas the computer, output line just gives the line. It doesn't really explain why, a particular move might move, an idea forward, or what the ideas are. The computer basically gives solutions without ideas, and the human can give ideas and then can't do solutions as well as the computer can. That's basically where we are at this point. So for that reason, I think strategy is probably, strategic games, less tactically oriented games are probably slightly better. Yeah. Um, But anyways, please send anything. Anything's helpful. I'm just trying to sort of build up the stream and have enough material. So I'm super happy to look at everything, here, and um, so yeah. So good question. I think I appreciate in the Grand Prix attack. Understanding is oh, sorry, 1 second. Hey, bye, Caitlin. Have a good day.
Thank you
Sorry,
for
sorry.
the fine breath.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
See you later. Okay, sorry about that. Um, yeah. Well, no. I mean, we did it. We did yours first, Anch. It was an interesting game. But yeah. So let's see. But it'll be on the live stream, Anch. I appreciate you sending the game and sending it in, and hopefully my ideas are helpful. Um, uh, Yeah, no. So I'm just looking at but yeah, no. Thank you very much for contributing to the game, Anch, and all the games that you send in are super helpful, particularly on days where we don't necessarily have as much to look at. But yeah, thanks. Uh, but yeah, no. I think that's probably a good guideline stopped clock. I think on this E6, definitely it's basically better if d6 has been played because then at least black will have to spend more time setting up d5, so e6 and then d5 here. um I think that's probably probably better. But castles, knight f6, d3, knight d4. I mean, bishop c4 is playable in the Grand Prix attack. But I guess I would say it's playable in the Grand Prix attack relative to the it's playable in the Grand Prix attack relative to normal Sicilians because you can play f5 and break the force of this e6 pawn. This e6 pawn is really what makes bishop c4 problematic, and in an early move to Sicilian, this in an early like bishop e4 c5 bishop c4 type Sicilian. This pawn on f2 is too many moves away from becoming solid. So I would say basically having a pawn on f4 would probably be my idea for the biggest determinant of when it's good to play bishop c4 in the Sicilian. But I don't know. I mean, it's playable in many lines. Some of which are surprising. Um, so anyways, that's what I would say. The f4 f5 line is what sort of makes the bishop on c4 more playable. Um, but yeah, anyways, bishop b5, bishop knight d7, pawn takes, pawn takes. White's kingside pawns are a little bit tricky here. They're a little bit they're a little bit fractured. There's no real king safety problems, yet. I think the king. Well, I don't know. Maybe the king can go to h2. The rook can go to g2. I don't know. I guess yeah. I guess this was actually better than I thought it would be. Um, so maybe bishop to e3. Um, I think bishop to b5 probably is not, or maybe knight e2. This is sort of tricky because this pin on the knight on f3 got to be a problem. I'm wondering maybe here h3, like because this is something, I think, a formation that's probably with super accurate play not terrible for white, but like this looks dangerous. Um, yeah, no, I think that's probably it. Stop clock, or I mean, it's I think that pin is somewhat dangerous. Basically opening your G file, uh, especially opening your G file could offer some opportunities for Black's queen to get in, and for like G5 and Rook G8 to get played. I think that's sort of dangerous. This one here, you probably have to. Yeah, so an earlier, yeah, maybe an earlier bishop to b5. Um, like here, like let's see when this bishop to c4 was played. When bishop to c4 was played, it was the second most popular move, which means it's a playable move. But bishop to b5 here is 6 times more common, and I think that's because it does pin this knight and prevent this bishop from getting too powerful. Then probably a6 gets played, and then you play bishop takes c6, bishop takes c6, and then either castles or h3. But that really diminishes the power of this bishop on g4 pin. Otherwise, it's just yeah, it's just power. It gets powerful with the knight coming in. There's yeah, I think, um, but it's up to you. But and I think the eval here is still equals, but I think this probably just isn't the best line for white here. Um, that open G file looks unnecessarily dangerous. Um, so here, yeah, all right. So here you get an awesome attack on the queen side. This looks great. 1.5 up, and just basically with knight a7, d5, king a8, you've equalized. No, we're still working on it, Amet. We'll get to that pretty soon. I think it might be the next one or maybe the one after that. But we're definitely gonna get to it. Yeah, no. Thanks for stopping by. Thanks for joining the stream. Um, but yeah, so here this is a win for white. So good win. Good tactics. Solid execution, and good job getting a quick attack against this queenside castling. Queenside castling followed by rook c1. I like. Basically getting this rook on this open file, I think, is theoretically the correct idea there. Yeah, so let's yeah, no. So it's a good question, and I think this one's mostly about just opening theory. So, you know, Bishop c4. I guess I would. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for stopping by, Anch. And on your game was first right at the beginning of this stream. And Yeah, I hope you like the analysis. Thank you for contributing the game. It makes the stream that much better to have the material that you send in. So thanks a lot for that. Have a good class, Anch. Um, so yeah, so bishop to c4, bishop to b5. Yeah, I think just in general, bishop to b5 here. Bishop to c4 is tempting, but um, yeah, I would just the engine eval is about half a pawn different. The opening book is much bishop b5 is much more popular. Um, yeah, it will help you avoid challenges. I think it might not be as fun to play, but uh this it will help you avoid this earlier issue with this doubled h pawn. Here basically, now white's not really going to have any. I mean, and there's good things about this too for black, which is the rook gets this open file, and the bishop got traded off. But I think I think either castles or h3 here are both reasonable responses. And now that pin is, basically that bishop can't take that knight, or it'll, equalize the minor pieces here. Um, that seems aggressive. Uh, yeah, I mean maybe. I guess I'm sort of lame. I'm like, I'm lame in the sense that uh basically I just don't go for these crazy, I don't go for the most extreme lines. There's a lot of good chess to be played, like by playing average openings and then just being tactically and strategically stronger than your opponent. I feel like there's a lot of kind of emphasis on these really like crazy, I mean, they're very pretty lines, so I appreciate them. But in terms of maximizing results, there are a lot of games that can be won by just sort of playing, relatively average conservative opening material into move like 10, and then just coming up with better plans than your opponent, better plans and better tactics. That's probably I think that's the way to go. Um, yeah, no, I think that's good, and I think feeling like you have good control over the situation is good. But yeah, yeah. So these closed openings will force your opponent into opening lines that you're familiar with. Um, but I think you can still do that, basically within, a forcing main line. So like bishop b5, e6, bishop takes c6, b takes c6, either d3 or h3, but say h3 because it's more forcing. This I actually like a lot better, to be honest. I feel like here, white has good development. D3 can be played. White center is good. This overall this feels a lot more solid to me. This and the way that we can get to this is just this Grand Prix, bishop to g4, conservative bishop to b5, um, a6 takes, and then h3. And then here, honestly, like I feel this is good. Like this basically this opening does offer black some opportunity to play plans. Like no response here for black is going to be forced. Black has 4 in book responses, but overall I feel like here you're at a pretty good point where you're not really in much danger. So that's an idea. I you know but anyways, I guess I would say you can come up with forcing controlling lines out of bishop to b5, as opposed to bishop to c4. And the advantage of this bishop to c4 is that a move like knight to d4, which actually isn't playable right now. Like, I don't think so. Knight d4 here, I think you can get some stuff on bishop takes f7, right? Oh no, you play knight takes d4, bishop takes d8, or bishop takes e1, bishop to b5, and then I assume you know this. You've seen this trap before. This one. Uh, this trap here can be yeah, that's a great idea. Stop clock. Hey, thank you very much. Thanks for observing us, Shrek. I appreciate you joining. So yeah, so bishop to b5 on king e8, and overall, I think White's in a pretty good place. You know, uh, but I think if you can avoid I think if you can avoid that knight to d4 after the bishop to g4 pin, that's probably a good course of action. Um, uh, yeah. If you're into open lines, those are good ones that Aphelion recommends. Interesting. Uh, but I do understand what you're saying, Stop Clock, about that. Wanting to play lines where you feel like you have the opening knowledge advantage. That makes sense. Yes, yeah. No, I understand. Right. Yeah, and I guess at the end of the day, I'm pretty, in terms of my personal style, like I'm pretty in favor of the just play chess thing, or basically the play chess concept. I'm super heavy on tactics. Being tactically stronger than your opponent, I see as a very valuable thing. Having better strategic planning than your opponents is, a very good thing, and I think that will get you pretty far. Then you'll be, sort of in my position where you might have stronger tactics than players of your rating, but worse opening knowledge. But that's a problem that I think you would encounter a good amount later. Um, Play chess and be tactically strong are in my mind very close together. Those two concepts are very related, in the way that I look at things. Um, I don't know. I mean, I play a number of different lines against the Sicilian. Anything can be played. Close Sicilian can be played. Grand Prix, attack can be played. I wouldn't be too stuck on any specific opening line. I think lots of stuff can be good. But I play Alapin sometimes. I play the closed Sicilian, basically closed Sicilian sometimes, and I know opening Sicilian sometimes. A little bit I don't like playing the open Sicilian necessarily so much because book knowledge for that can be really high at a relatively low level. I mean, there are like experts that know Sicilian open Sicilian theory like 20 moves in. So I actually am of the mind where I basically avoid the open Sicilian most of the time. Just because it's it requires some opening theory knowledge, or good opening theory knowledge. Um, yeah, Wing Gambit is I think playable. I don't think it's refuted. There's many different ways to do it. Yeah, I think it's not it basically best case scenario leads to equality ish. Um, so I would say close. I think there's some very good close Sicilian lines. But I would pair them maybe with bishop to b5. Um, but that's where I assess the thing to improve on in this game, stop clock. Um, just allowing the combination of knight to d4 and bishop to g4 is this combination I think is going to be good for black. So you can sidestep that pretty quickly by having the bishop on b5 as opposed to c4, and I do think that that's probably a more natural closed Sicilian. This bishop to b5 move is a more natural closed Sicilian bishop square, bishop diagonal. But yeah, I think overall I think it's pretty good. Uh, you know, after this, you equalize relatively quickly, get a good attack. And my main improvement for you is not allowing that early minor piece structure for black. You can sidestep it, so you might as well, because allowing it leads to equality slash slightly better position for black. If you can avoid equality or slightly better position for black as white, you might as well. Uh, that's interesting. Yeah. That's in, Danish Gambit is an interesting opening. Uh, I don't. I mean, it's interesting. I think it may lead to. I think at a highest level, it's probably not super playable, but it's not horrible either. And can lead to some quick aggressive wins. Um, but yeah, stop clock. That's my main thing. I'm gonna. I guess I would say, in this case, I would advise against bishop to c4 as opposed to bishop to b5, or bishop to e2 maybe. Yeah, no, I think that's true. Stop clock. I think you're right about that. It's just a stylistic thing. Um, I I guess I'm sort of like wanting to I don't know. For me, chess it's very fun for me to play chess. Like the concept of like playing chess and doing positions with tactical strength and positional strength, and just coming up with kind of non original ideas basically. But Danish has some ability to maneuver and make original ideas too. But the opening moves and opening concepts are pretty well predetermined. Yeah, no. I think that bishop to b5 as opposed to c4 move is where I would revise stop clock. But overall, I think that's where I would look. But anyways, it's a very interesting game. I think you played well and you got some good tactical. You capitalized well tactically. But I would re-examine bishop to b5 in this particular case, or bishop to b5 versus bishop to c4 in this particular case, just because this knight to d4 or bishop to g4 combination is so problematic. Thank you very much for stopping by, Stop Clock. Thank you for sending the game, and yeah, please keep sending those games. I like looking at them, and they make they're very interesting. They help me learn, and definitely cement my knowledge of the openings as well. Um, okay, here we go. Game number 3. Um, okay, so let's take a look at this one. This is an early c3. I forget what this is called. Is this Okay, so this is Ponziani. C3, D4. Okay. Very quick win for black here. I wanted to so let's take this from black's perspective. And let's look at this. So this I think will give a good opportunity to play against the Ponziani opening. Um, but obviously this doesn't really work super well for white here. This ends up being pretty good for black. Um, but where are the missteps? So here we're in pretty well established theory. I mean, there's 1,100 games here, and overall, black's in a or white's in a pretty good place. I mean, white's got his standard initiative, or I guess now it's eval close to equal. So I guess they're saying the Ponziani opening in general is not the most aggressively attacking opening, which I guess is true. Knight c3 makes quicker plays for the center. Bishop c4 makes plays for the center and attacks f7. But c3 I think is not unplayable. I mean, it's basically coming up with a way to play a supported d4 early, and I think that makes sense. This early c4. Uh, but yeah, so knight f6 and it's evaluated as equal. Um, Here, early d4. I guess knight takes e4 is playable, but I'm gonna look at the opening theory because this is not an opening that I know super well. D4, knight takes e4, and e takes d4 are playable. So is d6. So we have basically 3 or 4 options here that are all basically evaluated as reasonable by the opening book. Let's look at the analysis here. Here, the analysis is pretty clear. So in situations like these where you have several popular moves, but a difference in the computer analysis, I'm just going to make a general principle that we should defer to the computer for those. Usually, basically, there's many things in the there's many things uh, in like the opening book that came in before the invention of computers, right? And I'm so I guess in my assessments, I really do believe that the computer provides objectively best moves. Computers play at a 3200, 3300 level. The computer is better than any person. So a lot of the opening theory lines were written before computers, could make the best objective assessments. So we were humans were sort of stumbling around trying to come up with the best ideas, and computers weren't around to correct them. So humans, especially opening concepts, aren't really tied to aren't really tied to tangible wins or improvements or opening lines. Computer analysis is, but human opening analysis prior to like 1985 or whatever, wasn't. I guess what I would say here is, if there's two relatively equal opening lines here, but there's a difference in the computer analysis, go to the computer analysis because the opening lines, I would bet, here, the best line is the same as the most popular line, but it's relatively close. But I'm going to guess a high proportion of the opening lines in the second most popular opening line are older lines, older games, played at objectively not as good, not as high a level. So anytime there's a choice between two opening lines that seem, relatively good, and the computer, favors one by more than half a pawn, I'm going to choose the one that the computer favors. And I think that will be the correct strategy. Knight takes e4, d5, knight e7, knight takes e5, knight g6, queen d4, queen f6. Okay, so this is interesting. Um, uh, this this is an interesting situation. Um, Basically, the knight takes on e4. The d pawn advances. The knight takes and equalizes material. The knight plays to g6, and as opposed to taking the knight, the queen moves to d4. And then black tactically defends or attacks the d5 pawn. Hey, good morning, Tarash. Thank you very much for joining the stream. So here, uh, you know, there's a few options. Basically, white could try to hold everything together, or so queen takes e4, or he could play knight takes g6, or he could even play knight to f3. Um, these the two most popular lines are the first and third options. So here, queen takes e4, queen takes e5, queen takes e5, knight takes e5, bishop f4. And here, basically both sides have two bishops. This d5 pawn is a little overextended, but probably not too terrible because c4 and b3 can be played. Um, it looks like a relatively equal position. D6 I'm pretty sure is the best. This knight's probably going to get traded for this bishop. Otherwise, it's going to be a knight on a good outpost. But overall, I think basically Black's in a pretty good situation here. Black has sort of secured equality. So that's Black's first goal in a solid chess game. Um, we can keep going through these lines, but the most popular here is knight a3, a6, castles, bishop b7, rook e1, knight g6. Basically, a pretty straightforward game in which material. I guess this line sacks in exchange, but material is roughly equal. And at the end of the day, this opening has well established theory that is winning. Anyways, the black's solidest move here is knight takes e4. Knight takes e4, d5, knight e7, knight takes, knight g6, and queen d4, queen f6. And here, basically, this is I mean, this is an equalish game. Let's take a look at this end game. Or sure, I'm interested in seeing that, Tarash. Let's look. Okay, I'm interested. I don't know this. I mean, this is not super frequently played. Uh, okay, so bishop c5 after d5. Um, okay, that is not this game. So here d5, queen a4, bishop c5. Um, mm, f6, bishop b5. Yeah, sure. Um, yeah, I mean, it's kind of crazy in chess. You just eventually stop seeing these lines so frequently. Uh, okay, knight f6 after c3. Okay, okay. Knight takes e4. Okay. All right. Interesting. Uh, that is pretty aggressive. Okay, so yeah, so this looks better for black. But yeah, okay, sure. Um, so knight takes e4, and then white's most common line here is d5, and then bishop to c5. D takes, bishop takes, king e2. Yeah, no, this is interesting. I don't know these lines, Tarash. I'm happy to defer to you on them. Um, okay, I mean it's an interesting idea. So objectively, the best line here is d4, knight takes e4, as opposed to pawn takes d4. We've established this by looking at this. Who's playing the Ponziani, Tarash? I mean, honestly though, like, how often are you seeing the Ponziani? Really, that's crazy. Nobody plays that at my level. I mean, it's awesome that people played at your level for sure. That is insane. Who's teaching it? Ah, that's what it is. Okay. Someone did a video. All right, cool. That is hilarious. That's funny. Um, but yeah, it's funny. I don't know these lines are. It's great. No, it's great for me to revisit this stuff because it's like how I probably, if you were to ask me how often I see this, I do play knight e4 e5 knight f3 knight c6. I probably see this like one out of every um maybe 100 games, maybe less. I never see this. I promise you. But it's cool to know the line, but it's like this is it's awesome, and it's awesome for you guys to show it me. So I really appreciate you sending the game. But I bet I see this like one out of every 100 games or less. Like it is not played, which is interesting. And I should learn it. But yeah, one out of 100 or less. I promise you. I never see this. Um, but it's good to learn. I want to learn it. It sounds like if it's popular at whatever class level, I'm sure that I'll have to play those people when they get up from class level to master level. So, um, yeah, no, I would bet 100 games or less. But that said, I'm very happy to learn it. It's very interesting to learn the good refutation. But I defer to you guys on the. I'm happy to admit that my knowledge on this is not as good as others because yeah, no, I never see this. Knight takes d5, bishop c5. Okay, I mean this looks really sharp. I believe that it's sharp. Uh, okay, interesting. Interesting, Tarash. Um, bishop takes, b takes, queen. I mean, yeah, this looks good. Any line that leads to the king having to play to e2 is probably a good sign. Um, so yeah, so say d5, knight takes d5, bishop c5, d takes c6, bishop takes f2, and yeah, cool. Okay, so king to e2, and then bishop to b6. But see, here's the eval. The eval is swinging towards white here. So if this opening is busted, right? What or basically if bishop c5 busts this opening, is it just that the computer isn't finding the favorable eval? I mean, like, is the computer missing the favorable? Like, the computer misses the favorable eval in tactical openings. So I definitely believe that. But um, what? Yeah. What's the logic behind that? Okay, so say, got it. Okay, that makes sense to me. I yeah. So king e2. Because here, look, like I mean, it's plus point 0.5, which given that it's very complicated, given that black is basically down a piece, right? But the king is very displaced, so it is a hard situation to really come up with an assessment for. Queen a4, f5, knight d2, castles, knight takes e4. Yeah, yeah, no. It's really, I appreciate you explaining this to me because in an opening that I see one out of every 100 games, or from since I don't even play that often, you probably see this one out of every 500, one out of every 1,000 games. So d4, f takes d5. Yeah, no. Opening line. That's true. 40 black giving black a 40% win rate is a good thing. Uh, this seems to neutralize for white, but there are opportunities for white to misstep. Unlike like this move in particular, like this move basically voluntarily gives up the queen, right? Uh, so like queen takes e5, rook e8. It's sort of an unnatural thing for white to do here, right? Like it's much more natural to play queen to c2, on which like bishop to b6, and then black is way up. Yeah, no. I'm actually pretty curious. I'm curious, Tarash. This is interesting. Um, but yeah, no, I understand. I understand the explanation of that super. Basically the computer playing a super accurate line that a human is unlikely to play. Um, so like yeah, like basically it looks like a single move line for white at many points. Uh, but that said, why would white be playing this line, right? If why is white playing this line if there's without knowing the theory, if there's only one opening theory line that is justifiable, right? Like it's sort of a risky idea for white to be playing that way. Um, yeah. Very interesting though. I'm gonna so we'll know. Yeah, so we'll know this. All right, cool. So if anyone's playing if anyone plays against the Ponziani, I do advocate this. This looks legitimately good for black. Cuz black is not going to uh yeah. Um so because black is not going to basically deal with this game. Um Anyways, pretty interesting. Hmm. Yeah. Anyways, that's the idea. Ponziani, if you're running into it, d4, knight takes e4, d5, bishop c5, and we'll know this. We'll know this going forward. If anyone plays against this early c3 move, it's good. I didn't know it. But yeah, no. I agree. And for that reason, I think it's a good idea to play that line. This line here. E4, E5, knight F6, D4, knight takes E4. Um, but the actual game got played. And here, uh, basically, black is looking a good amount better. Yep, good win. Good win. Interesting. Thank you very much for sharing that game, Yu-Gi-Oh. And yeah, no, that is really interesting. Let's take a look at the next one. Okay, cool. Here you go, chess fan. Here's your game. I'm just gonna step away for 1 second, but we're gonna start on chess fan's game in 2 minutes or less. I just need to answer a phone call. Sorry about that. Hey, sorry about that. Hope I didn't lose everybody. Uh, Sorry, I just needed to get that. Okay, cool. So this is a game played by this is a game played by chess bra fan. Okay, it's a Sicilian knight f3 into bishop to b5. This opening. Um, let's take a look. Most popular line here, g6 or d6 or e6. Makes sense, as you know it normally is in the Sicilian. But here instead, black plays queen to b6, knight to c3, e6, e5. And here, this is an unusual move for white. White normally in the Sicilian does not want to play opening simplifying, or basically center simplifying moves. This is sort of a situation in which, basically, e5, e5 is often played too early in the Sicilian. Here, it's played way too early. Um, we were talking earlier in one of the games we were showing where basically, e5 was played against d6, and then d6 takes e5, and then white's center is neutralized. Here, it's basically the same concept. I understand why it's appealing because it means that the knight can't play to the like natural knight f6 square. I get that, but it's just too easy to remove and too easy to undermine. So like I'm guessing that it's gonna call for d6 or d5. Um, the knight's gonna develop to g7 instead, which is not really that much worse. And the knight f6 was sort of conditional on playing knight to d5 anyways, right? Um, so overall, this is not really that exciting or anything. This basically plays into the same kind of general concept as before. D takes d6, bishop takes d6, bishop e7, and now basically we're e5 was undermined quickly, and now black has center control. E4 is valuable here because it provides a level of center control and control over d5. But once e5 is played, the d5 square in particular is black's for the rest of the game, pretty much. I think. Um, I think basically e5 switches the eval towards black. White, with e5, white pretty much relinquishes center control, and that's not a good idea. You know, it can be it becomes a worse. It's the earlier in the game, white kind of gives up center control, the worse it is for him. So even though this is tempting, and it is tempting to restrict knight f6 here, it's not worth giving up control over the d5 square. Here pawn takes d6, bishop takes d6, bishop e7, and overall, black's got a relatively solid position. White's got a really like solid position after this stress on c5. Let's just quickly look at this because I want to make sure that I fully understand it. Um, d5, bishop takes d6. Black is better. Black has control of the center. He has control of this square, this square, this square, this square, this square, this square. Cool. This square. Awesome. But after uh, so castles gives up part of this advantage. A better move is f5, making the immediate threat towards the center. But even a more, I guess, a more developing move like bishop d7 is slightly better. I want to fully understand this change in eval, because here I really do think that black is leading. His control of the center is much better. His control of d4 in particular is much better. This bishop's not on a good diagonal, and this bishop is not as basically this bishop on c1 is the worst bishop on the board, with very limited mobility. I mean, bishop b2 probably, but overall, black's bishops are better as a group. So let's think of how black can best exploit this. F5 is the computer given move. The engine is also talking about knight to b4. Knight to b4 makes sense. Black doesn't really need more control over the d4 square. He's already got it. This pawn threatening d4 is fine for black. Um, Castles c3, bishop d7. Yeah, I guess, and there must be a tactical response to this. So b4, I guess, is the issue. B4 puts pressure on the c5 pawn, which black wants to maintain. A better plan here is to get that queen off that diagonal, or to move, move f5 to knock the knight off of this attack, so that basically the pawn can be held. Uh, but b4 actually does make it so that black can't really hold this pawn, right? Black can't move the pawn. Um, on f5, knight takes f5, bishop takes f5, pawn takes f5. So basically, black hangs a pawn here. To a somewhat advanced tactic, um, but it's good. It's good to see and avoid. Here, like I guess, yeah, bishop d7 is not going to work. Queen to a5 might work. Uh, and queen, yeah, f5 maybe. Computer's pushing for f5, or just straight up removing that queen from that diagonal. I don't like either of those because they don't really advance. They don't really advance development. So like, I'm, I don't know. I guess there's probably no straightforward development advancing way uh, to get that queen off of that diagonal, or to defend it really. Um, I guess f5 at the end of the day. I mean, you might as well play the. I guess or it's not even the objectively best move. So okay, queen d8. You need to get the queen off that diagonal. There's no way. I guess there's just no tactical way to not do that. B4 pin is a good threat. The type of thing that could actually be a useful resource. So, if you see an open, if you see a queen on b6, b4 can potentially be, if it's undefended on b6, b4 can become a potentially strong tactical idea, one that White saw in this game. I like it. I think that's a good idea. That wins this pawn. So it's a pawn winning tactic, executing on this, or basically operating on this pin. Cool. Um, a lot of tactics here. But yeah, so anyways, White wins the pawn here. The eval shifts in his direction. Prior to that hung pawn, Black was winning, and I like Black's position better. This center control is good. Um, and also, by the way, on queen d8, knight can't take c5 because bishop takes, queen takes d3. The d3 bishop is hanging. So multiple tactics make that both first the threat of b4 and the response to d8 work. Um, anyways, this looks pretty good. And then Black comes up with some cool stuff here. So yeah, Black's basically trying to come up with a winning attack here. Knight to g3 is a pretty cool idea, actually. Um, uh, on takes g3, queen takes g3, and then it's a draw, right? Because at any point, if this knight, so pawn, I mean, it has two different tactical lines to it. So pawn takes, queen takes, king h1, queen h3, king g1, queen g3, king h1, and then if the knight goes here, then the bishop plays to c6, and cements and basically pins the queen to the king, d5, pawn takes d5, queen goes somewhere, and then the discovered check, right? Um, but yeah, so basically, so that's the line where the knight gets taken here. Queen to e3 is pretty interesting because knight takes c2 and queen h6, right? Um, very interesting. So knight to e2, and then king to h1, bishop to c6, and bishop blocks, bishop takes, queen takes, and black doesn't actually get any material out of this. So queen f4, queen takes e2, queen takes f6. This is pretty freeing for black though. This actually is not super bad for black. But anyways, there's a lot of tactical complexity in this game. Not all of which I can really add much to. I'm just sort of going to be repeating computer lines. Yeah, good question, Amet. Let's look at this. I am very curious as well. Yeah, queen e3, queen f4, queen takes f4, knight e2 is the response. Why is it a brilliant move? Because basically this knight takes c2, queen to h6. Um, Interesting, right? Knight takes c2, queen to h6, and then uh, this threat on the king side. And then any basically, um, uh, black has played this clever tactical idea where if you take, it's a draw, and if you move the queen, basically anywhere where it's not going to get taken, the knight takes on c2 and wins material. So it's a good tactic. Um, and look how differentiated it is from all the other tactics. So queen e3, um, queen f4, queen takes, and then knight takes f4. Makes sense. But yeah, so queen e3 is brilliant. It is a good way of defeating what was a tactically very complicated move. Um, why is it a draw? Pawn takes, queen takes, king h1, queen here, knight here. Or basically, so this is clearly a draw, right? This like for sure is a draw. Uh, but if the knight instead goes here, then the bishop can go here, and the rook goes to f3, queen h6, king g2, queen d2, and that queen falls. Well, yeah, at least that repetition. If not, if black doesn't have the repetition here, um, so pawn takes, and then queen takes. If black opts away from the repetition, then it's actually even better for black. Black gets a winning pin from the bishop on c6. So that's pretty strong, right? So queen e3, and overall here, uh, white is winning. This open file on the king gets too dangerous. Um, so yeah, so it was a good tactical play. I thought knight g3 was a really good tactical attempt. Queen e3 is a tough move to find. Not impossible, you know. Queen e3, queen h6. You could find this one. Um, but uh, but knight g3 was a good attempt, and but queen e3 refutes it. It's a little generous on the brilliancy concept, but that's okay. Overall, strong game. Yeah, strong game. But yeah, let's look at let's. I thought I was knight g3 was a good idea by Chessbra fan. The only things I would change in this game, I thought queen b6 is a little bit. I mean, at some point, right? It sort of is, especially in these tactically complicated positions. I'm never. I as well as every GM basically, maybe not Magnus Carlsen, is just gonna be deferring to the engine for lines. Um, it's how it is. These tactical positions are just computer so computer solved. So that's not where that's not what a coach is for, or less teacher is for, really. Tactics tactics we're all in below the engine. The engine is above us on all of that, so it's just how it is. But here, yeah. So basically, I think I'm gonna point towards tactical vision. B4 was a strong tactic, and something that maybe as the white side uh, Queen's Pawn game or Sicilian game, it could potentially be a tactic that we could replicate. This pin, this pin of the C5 pawn, like in a closed Sicilian, C5 getting pinned by B4. But here, this, yeah, that's an improvement. Otherwise, there weren't many errors in this game. Allowing this B4 tactic, which I think is a pretty good advanced tactic, swung the eval by about 2 points here, and then Black never really regained the initiative, unfortunately. There's probably some inefficiencies here. I thought Knight G3 was a good try, and White basically had to play a brilliancy to refute it. But at the end of the day, pretty strong play by Black. Unfortunate, strong play by White, pretty strong play by Black, and just this one missed tactic. Yeah, tactical vision. Unfortunately, just these things happen. But at the end of the day, not really much you can do if you miss a pawn winning tactic. C5 pawn is very important to Black's central control and Black's general position there. So when the C5 pawn gets removed, the position really suffers. Knight G3 was a good try. Anything other than Queen E3 seems to draw or win. But he found Queen E3, so that's the way things go. Interesting game. Thank you very much for sending that, Chess Fan, and please keep sending those. They're very interesting. Hey, good morning, Hyperion. How are you? Interesting. All right. So the next one, I want to try something a little bit different. As opposed to look at this eval. I mean, it was very accurate by White, and kind of a rough eval for Black. I think Black played significantly better than this. There's really only one mistake, or one decisive mistake. So for the next game, I want to try something a little bit different. I want to just jump into an opening line, and we'll take a look at basically it's a King's Gambit line that Aphelion brought up as something that we would be interested in seeing. So let's do that. E4, E5, F4, Knight C6, Knight F3, F5. Okay, this is interesting. This is really interesting. So when I see F5 after E5, I think of mostly of the Latvian Gambit. But man, I don't know this theory at all. So this is called Miles defense. All right. Interesting. Here this actually is the most popular line out of this King's Gambit declined. Okay. F5, and then there's options. F takes E5, okay. E4, Knight E5, Knight F6, D3, Queen E7, Knight C3. Okay. Yeah, this looks fine. Um, so what are the main things that are going on here? It's gonna be an extremely tactical opening. There's gonna be basically a lot of threats relating to advancement of these pawns. Threats along open lines for the queen on both D1, H5, and Queen H4, Queen E1. No, I don't know that one, Tarash. Which line is that? Um, So yeah, so e takes f5, e4, knight e5, knight f6. And here, it's kind of a complicated position. Um, I don't know. I mean, basically, Queen h4 wasn't really playable, and white's showing a slight advantage. Is e takes f5 or knight takes e5 better? Well, objectively, it's e takes f5. Okay, so this is how white's supposed to respond. I mean, I think this is pretty clear that it's that e takes f5 is the best option here. Uh, yeah, I don't think that offers too much instructional content, Tarash. Very interesting, but I don't think it's fun. It's a funny opening, but the odds of anyone seeing that in a tournament game probably mean that it's not a playable one. But interesting. Uh, if you and your opponent, maybe someone should set up a thematic tournament for that, and then we could justify studying it. Um, but okay, cool. So e takes f5, and then there's two options for black: e4 or e takes f4. Um, knight e5, knight f6, and then so knight e5 is basically a pretty clear first choice. And then let's say there's two lines here, so we're gonna take a look at both of them. Knight f6, d3, queen e7, knight c3, knight takes e5, f takes e5, queen takes e5. Okay. Interesting. So options for white here. I have a feeling that white probably shouldn't do much to undermine this e4 pawn. I think you should probably just try to leave it alone. One of these lines is d takes e4, but I feel like here basically neutralizing the center is not necessarily that good for white. He's also down a pawn. So say let's look at this d takes e4 line. D takes e4, d5, bishop d3, d takes, queen e2. Bishop takes f5, and white's losing by a pawn here. So is this a positional win for white? No, I think this is pretty bad for white. So let's look at some of the lines here. Um, so e5, knight e5, and white's eval is positive. Let's only play lines where white's eval continues to be positive. I mean, it might be a fairly narrow band, but let's still think about it. Knight f6. Evals plus 0.5 to 0.8. And then moves for white include d3, knight c3, d4. Okay, say d3. D3 looks worse. The eval flips to black. Um, should we trust that eval? I don't know. It's kind of an interesting question because these evals are very likely to shift in openings that are this tactically complicated. Uh, Other kind of intuitive like moves. Knight to c3. Uh, Knight to c3 looks objectively a lot better, right? This looks like a better opening for white. Queen e7, bishop e2, and just knight takes e5, pawn takes e5. And the good thing about this, though, is that white basically has some margin for error. Nothing looks too catastrophically bad for white, right? D4 looks best, but G4 also is getting an equal eval. D4 is the most intuitive move, so I guess white doesn't look like he has a terrible position here. So D4, e takes, queen takes, d5, rook f1, and I like white's position a lot. So bishop d7, and there's three moves that have basically white up almost a pawn or roughly a pawn here. This looks pretty interesting. But let's really figure this out because this has fairly objective solutions. Um, E takes f5, I think, is pretty clearly the best. Okay, E takes f5. Actually, but let's look at the second one too. So the second one is d4, right? Or d3. Let's look at E takes f5. E takes f5, e4, knight e5, knight f6. Okay, so there's two good moves for white, g4 and knight c3. Um, but this was the most important. We know, but we know the theory to move 5. On this counter gambit, pawn takes f5, e4, knight e5. Going the other direction, f5, e takes f5, and then here, e takes f4, you play d4, d5, and this actually looks pretty playable. This looks like a pretty normal game where white will just be able to go back to developing normally, and nothing will really go terribly wrong for him. So I like this. This basically is interesting. But this gives us a really concrete way of like what to do after if you're playing King's Gambit as white, what to do as as the white player here. E takes f5, e4, knight e5. F5, e takes f5, e takes f4, d4, d5, and this transposes to a normal game. This one I'm less afraid of. So this line here, I feel like in a game you would be able to transpose it into you would be able to transpose it into something that you would recognize as a situation in which you're just supposed to develop normally, nothing bad's going to happen, and white's going to be in good shape. The other way, e4, knight e5, knight f6. Yeah, so e4 is the most popular move as black for sure. E4, yeah, e4 is a 90% move, so that's the best. And also, I'm just not afraid of this. You just play d4, d5, and this is like a normal game. The games that are really dangerous for high level players, however you define it, the games that are the most dangerous for higher ranking players are the ones where basically the opening is unusual and it doesn't have an intuitive solution. So here, pawn takes f4. The opening is definitely unusual, but it has an intuitive solution. So this doesn't really scare me. This I can basically figure this one out on the fly during a game. For that reason, e4 is a lot scarier to me as the person, or would be a lot scarier to me as the person playing white here. Now I don't really know what to do. So I need to memorize knight e5, knight f6, and then there's a number of playable options for white, of which I think d3 is the best, but there's at least a few playable options. On knight takes e5, f takes e5, queen e7. This also looks dangerous because I don't know exactly what to do. Queen h5, king d8, bishop c4, queen takes e5, bishop takes g8. Okay. I mean, this is a mess, right? So this is like this would be, fairly difficult to solve really efficiently over the board if you've never seen it before. So let's slow this down. Knight e5, knight takes e5, pawn takes e5. Yes. So knight f6 does look pretty forced. Alternative, knight takes e5, but one of these two needs to be played because that queen h4 or queen h5 check is going to be a really bad problem for black if it's not defended against. G3, pawn takes g3 is bad for black. So knight takes e5, pawn takes e5, queen e7, queen h5, king d8. Yeah, looks like white's up a bit, but the solutions just aren't that intuitive, so it's tricky to play. D4 makes sense. D4, pawn takes d3, bishop takes d3, queen takes e5. Probably like king d1. But the central's kind of neutralized. White's not facing any like really severe threats. D4, pawn takes, bishop takes, queen takes, king d1, knight f6, queen f3, and like rook d1 coming, but the f5 pawn is defended. The king safety is relatively good, so not super scary for white. Looks fine. Okay, here I don't know, d5 maybe, but overall, this looks okay. So let's play it this way. This is with knight f6, d3, queen e7, knight c3, knight takes e5, f takes, queen takes, bishop e2, d5, d takes, knight takes, queen d5. And here, yeah, okay. Um, White looks okay. It doesn't look like the king's under immediate attack, and overall, I don't think a huge problem for white here. Um, yeah, I mean, this is really interesting. But let's just take it to the branch, because if nothing else, let's see if we can get this opening taken care of so that we don't make any errors and we can play it to basically the situation where you can play chess over the board. Um, this is fine. Okay, so here, the first move, and I'm gonna give this as probably a more a relatively restricted first choice. Pawn takes f5. On pawn takes f4, d4, and white is okay. White can make it through this game playing regular chess. Okay, first line. So we know this one. The other way, pawn takes f5, the forced move, very important. E4. Against e4, single move again, knight e5. Here, either knight f6 or knight takes e5. On knight f6, there's a few good moves, of which, probably, knight c3 is the best. Okay. Alternative, d3, queen e7, knight c3, knight takes e5, f takes e5. Yeah, this is good. Fine for white. Um, okay, cool. Let's look the other way. Knight f6, d3, queen e7, knight c3, and basically this line has played out well for black. So let's look. What's line is good for white? Either basically knight c3, d4. I guess knight c3 probably. So say knight c3, queen e7, or sorry, queen e7. But relatively normal development here, an ability to give back the pawn or the pawns, and basically white is fine. Materials equal. Queen takes e5, d4, queen takes f5, and white's got a better position. So basically, walking away from this analysis, I think we have some solved moves here. So pawn takes d5, pawn takes d4, d4. White is fine. Pawn takes f5, e4, knight e5, and it's either knight f6 or knight takes e5. On knight f6, yeah, no. This is interesting. So knight f6, and then like d3 probably, or basically knight c3, normal development. So against knight f6, normal development. Against the other move, knight takes e5, pawn takes e5, and then queen e7, queen h5, king d8, and then either bishop c4 or d4, but a willingness to give back the e5 pawn. It just can't be held. So, anyways, that's really interesting. Yeah, no, it's really interesting. So, but I mean, I think basically, what one needs against an opening like this, which believe me, you see less and less as you get to a higher and higher level. You really see this very type of play very infrequently. Is a situation in which you can basically get back to the concept of playing chess. If you can force an opponent who plays openings like this to play chess, and you're better at, you're basically you feel comfortable with your ability to play chess. That's really your goal here. You just need to know the theory well enough that you can force it into a position where intuitive, strategic, and tactical principles will win the game for you. That's the solution to an opening like this. Um, you know, I these tactics are dangerous, but you need to know them well enough to get to the point where you've sort of diffused the trickiness of it. If you can start a chess game, then you'll probably win it. Or ideally, you will if you've done your tactical studies. Um, Very interesting. Good, interesting game. And we've got, yeah. Thank you very much for recommending that, Aphelion. Um, Yeah, no. Thank you very much for sending it. Very interesting. And if you have any more ideas for openings like this, they're interesting to me. I never see this kind of stuff, but so if one was actually to play these kind of super tricky openings against me, I would have problems with them because I see them so infrequently and they're so dangerous. My goal, as a chess player facing these openings is basically just to get it to the point where I can get to basically get to a position where you can play chess, and then I feel comfortable with my ability to play chess. But if what there's one that recommends a really big um, basically if there's an opening that recommends a obscure theory with counterintuitive solutions, those are the ones that are super dangerous against high level players. I mean, I saw this guy. I saw a 2150 easily beat a 2450 once out of the Elephant Gambit, and that really stuck with me. So, if you're playing a 2400, these types of things can be very dangerous. And I think in some sense that's why they're appealing. Yeah, I mean, I won't face them often, but it's good to know them. And in terms of strategic play, I yeah, it's the type of thing where you just don't have much knowledge. So it's good to have at least the base knowledge to get you to play a chess game out of those things. Even if you don't see it frequently. Hopefully, I'll remember the next time I see it. This is interesting. Um, Knight f6 against the Sicilian Alpin. Okay. This is interesting. Knight f6 is the most common move, um, and e5 is basically forced. Yeah, no, I think that's right, Tarash. I mean, basically, if you go with open games do have some of these very dangerous trappy sidelines because they're so tactically sharp. More closed games where there's less immediate tactics and more maneuvering generally don't have the same ability for a trap or some type of thing like that. They just can't go horribly wrong in the same way that an open game can. Uh, that said, people sort of stop playing traps at some level, but that means that they're still very dangerous against high level players. People get very excited. I don't know. I think basically, you have the opportunity to play these crazy strong, basically openings against crazy strong players and know that you have some shot of winning. Like that's an exciting prospect, to be honest. Um, Anyways, e5, knight d5, and then the most common here is d4. This is the real Alapin structure in my mind. This is good for white, very good central control for white, and uh, yeah. Um, Yeah, I mean that as a general overarching concept, that's right, Tarash. Basically semi-closed game. Just has less. There's less of these kind of well-explored pre-built traps. Um, but that means that if you're an opening game player like me, it's dangerous. You have the ability to see dangerous openings. They go away at some level, but like it's actually a really good idea, I think. If you get the opportunity, if you're a 1500 playing against a master, you will be able to snag some masters with these types of openings. I think that might be why they're so appealing. And why they're so people spend a lot of time kind of reviewing them at this point. Yeah. So here, d4 is the most popular move. Bishop c4 is well down the list. This is the standard, Sicilian Alpine line. Well, Tarash, it's really interesting because these weird lines. I think you really only have to learn the theory to the point where you've diffused them. You don't necessarily even really have to get them to the point where you've got a winning position. You can just get them to the point where you and your opponent are both forced to play like a relatively equal chess game. If you can get to that point, you're relying on a different skill than opening knowledge. So opening knowledge is required against these trap openings to the point where you can get it to a game where you're playing chess, but you don't need to learn it 12 moves in generally. Um, yeah. So here, bishop c4, e6, d4, c takes d4, pawn takes, d6, knight f3. And here, basically, this is uh, this is better for white. White has better center control, a big spatial advantage. This queen, I mean, if you look at how many open squares the queen has, it's more. Overall, I think white's got a pretty solid position here. Pawn takes d6, bishop takes, takes, castles, castles. And overall, it's a relatively equal open position. I don't think white. I think it's an error here for white to simplify. I think basically white should keep these structures on the board. Trading e for d6 is not the worst thing. You've still got this favorable d4 to e6 structure, but I think bishop takes d5 probably is too much. I think knight c3 might be the way to get that knight off that d5 post. Um, like knight c3, bishop b4, bishop 2, something like this, and that off that board. You don't need to trade white's better square bishop for it. This is not a good trade for white, I don't think. I think basically after that, white's winning chances go down a good amount. Um, anyways, knight takes, queen e7, and basically things trade off. White's a little better. There's some endgame maneuvering. Whoa, this got more dangerous than it needed to. Um, these rook and pawn, these rook and queen endgames are dangerous though. Here, in an ideal world, white just sort of wants to trade off material. Rook d3 is the correct move. Rook c2 makes sense. Queen takes makes sense. And then there's a winning tactic here. So what is that? That's queen e3. Queen e3, rook a d1, threatening mate. Uh, hmm. Yeah. Yeah, it's a bummer. This got really dangerous. When did G3 get played? Or G4 get played? Thank you very much for stopping by, Aphelion. Thanks very much for the recommendation of the opening, and feel free to either send more games or recommend them. Appreciate it, and thank you very much for helping the stream. Um, yeah. So, anyways, this is interesting. Queen takes, bishop f4. How do you basically the goal of white here is to neutralize. I see queen f3 is probably the best move, but tough question. Queen e3. Um, hmm. Queen e4. Yeah, queen e4. So I guess I would say that. Since this pawn or this rook and this pawn are defending each other, or this rook is defending this pawn on a6 and can't really be removed from that. I would play queen e4 here and control this long diagonal. That's an improvement that I think can be made in this endgame. Yeah, queen and rook endgame play is tricky. There's still a lot of tactics going on as well as standard endgame concepts. So there's really two very different things going on in queen and rook endgames. So yeah, let's look. D4, pawn takes, D6, and then white's winning. Instructionally, I wouldn't simplify this. If you hold the center, continue to hold it. Don't neutralize it. Play like knight f3. Pawn takes d6, bishop takes, pawn takes, castles, and you're basically in an equalish position. There's not really much reason to continue, trying to advance aggressively. Just support and develop. Knight c3, knight f3, these two moves. Yeah, no need to neutralize. And trading your good squared bishop for the knight on d5 is not theoretically a good concept. Um, Overall, white is attacking aggressively pretty much the whole game. Um, and here, just as an endgame principle, queen e4, controlling this long diagonal and the queening square, is the best idea. I don't think black can quickly assemble anything. Maybe f5, but like queen takes f5, so whatever. And white's in good shape. So yeah, so a number of improvements. I think the position was good, made sense. The first thing that I would correct is this d4, d6. Just continue to develop normally. Don't trade off the pawns here. There's no reason to. This e4 pawn is not worth that d7, or e5 pawn is not worth that d7 pawn. This trade isn't that great for you, so don't do it. And then this bishop is white's best minor piece. So it's better to trade off this knight c3 for this knight than it is to trade the bishop for it. Just a small improvement. And then as an end, and then you basically get to a slightly better end game. And the rook is defending this. The rook is exactly where you want it to be, a1. But the queen is more supportive of the pawn on the a file with e4 than a7. Is it wise to follow a certain engine line? It is if you understand the general concept, but it's not a good idea to memorize the engine line. Memorizing the engine line is difficult and will not. It's great to know the engine line, but I wouldn't memorize the engine line. What I would try to do is make it so that you understand the logic behind the engine line, and your play will naturally match what the engine line is. That's what the goal really is. Memorization as a general principle is not ideal. From a fundamental perspective, memorization is necessary sometimes. Like, how do you refute that King's Gambit game that we just looked at? That would probably require memorization to the 6th or 7th move or whatever. But the engine line, and the engine line is great for tactics. But in terms of opening play or early middle game play, don't go through the length of, or don't go through the concept of memorizing the engine line. You can play the engine line to see what the engine does and try to understand what themes it's going for. But in terms of an actual over-the-board game, you can memorize an engine line, but that's not super helpful, because once things diverge and your memorization is broken, and you're basically going to need to refer to the general concepts. So anyways, that's pretty much it. But it's a really good question. It's a really good question, Hyperion. And I think a lot of people have it. So I would say, understand the themes of the openings that you're playing. Understand potential strategies and ways to play the openings. But don't be stuck on the perfect memorization of the engine line. There may be a grandmaster type level where that's valuable, but at class and certainly at my level, just taking an engine line so you understand the concepts of it, or where the engine is trying to attack or what it's trying to advance, is way more important than memorizing what it does. So it's a good question though. I think we should wrap this up. My class is starting soon. Thank you very much, everyone, for the ideas for material and for the games that you've sent. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate you all participating in the stream. I'll be back at 6:05 p.m. Eastern. I'm excited to do that stream, and that'll be fun. Hope to see you guys there. Have a good one. Have a good day. Bye.